What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. In today's video, I'm going to be grading every single team in 2021 free agency. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials right there. Let's go and get started. Okay, first up, the Boston Celtics. Let me go ahead and check my notes here. Yeah, it's an F. They didn't do anything. They signed Enes Kanter, 1 year, $2.6 million. They did absolutely nothing. I guess they're waiting around on a Bradley Beal trade situation. I'm not sure. They had opportunities to get better. They were apparently in on Lonzo. There's some Dennis Schroeder buzz now. As they're recording this video, they did quite literally nothing. They get an F. Two teams here get an incomplete. Grizzlies and the Timberwolves. They didn't really do anything. They weren't really expected to do anything this offseason either. So we move on to the other 27 teams. The Portland Trailblazers are first up here. They get Norman Powell on a 5-year, $90 million deal, bring in Cody Zeller, Tony Snell, Ben McLemore on minimum contracts. They get a D. Granted, they had no cap space, but I don't love the Powell contract as a whole. $18 million a year. I understand he's a fine player. He's going to help them on the wings, but they didn't do anything to improve. And yes, it was tough with their cap space situation coming in the offseason, but that needs to be thrown out the window. You were on the verge of losing Damian Lillard. You did not move CJ McCollum to improve this roster in any way, and you're about to lose the one guy in the league that has actually decided that he would like to stay with his team for a long period of time despite not having high-level postseason success. I know the opportunities to improve weren't really there for Portland. That's why they get a D rather than F, but they definitely could have done more, and overall, I don't love the Powell contract. Next up, the Utah Jazz. Mike Conley, 3 years, $72. Rudy Gay, 2 years, $12. Hassan Whiteside on a 1 year minimum. I give them a B. The Conley deal is probably a bit of an overpay in the long run, but it's one that they had to make to continue to be one of the top teams in the Western Conference. And I really like the Rudy Gay signing as well as someone that they have needed as a versatile wing that can shoot and can defend. They needed someone to plug into that spot once they got to their bench. Rudy Gay is going to really help them. I like that 2 year, $12 million deal for them. The Whiteside thing is pretty irrelevant to me, other than the fact that they did have to trade away Derek Favors, so he does give them big depth. And physically, he's at least relatively similar to Gobert as this crazy big rim protector, although I'm not expecting Hassan Whiteside to play a huge role in the Jazz season this year. The Philadelphia 76ers, Danny Green, 2 years, $20. Georges Niang, 2 years, $6.7. And Andre Drummond on a 1 year minimum. I gave them a C because they missed out on the Kyle Lowry sign and trade where it would appear as though they would at least have some kind of a leg up there with the Philly connection. Obviously, no Ben Simmons trade yet, but specifically for free agency, the Danny Green thing is fine. Niang is fine. Missing out on the Kyle Lowry thing sucks. And then the Andre Drummond signing is just weird to me that he didn't go back to LA. It makes me think that there's no reason that any team should really want him. I understand it's good value, 1 year minimum for Andre Drummond. I just don't love the idea of him and Joel Embiid together. I'm sure he's going to absolutely destroy bench units on the offensive glass, and it'll be at least a half-decent signing. I just would rather not have Andre Drummond on my team, and so any team that does sign him, even on a 1 year minimum, is going to get a bit of a downgrade from me. The Phoenix Suns, Chris Paul, 4 years, $120. Campaign, 3 years, $19. JaVale McGee, 1 year, $5. Abdel Nader, 2 years, $4.2. And Kaminsky, 1 year, $2. I gave them a B+. I talked about Chris Paul as an overpay in the long term in yesterday's video, but again, similar to the Mike Conley thing, it's a deal they had to make. There's no way they could have let him leave. And I really like the fact that they were able to keep Campaign. He was a free agent this offseason. It was a question mark, certainly, if he was going to return to the team or not. I feel like that's a pretty fair price, and they addressed the biggest issue from last year's team, which is a significant lack of front court depth. They keep Kaminsky, who had some moments in the playoffs. They bring in JaVale McGee, who you know is going to be able to give you 15 to 20 minutes, a good play off the bench as a big guy. Really like what Phoenix did in free agency. Next up, the Brooklyn Nets. Patty Mills, 2 years, $12. Bruce Brown, James Johnson, and Blake Griffin all on 1 year deals, and DeAndre Bembry on a 1 year deal as well. I gave them an A. I think getting Patty Mills is a huge get for this group, continues to add to what is a really, really good bench unit in Brooklyn, can really shoot the basketball. We all know what Patty Mills can do. Bringing back Bruce Brown is a big deal as well. I wouldn't have been surprised if he got a relatively significant offer from a different team. He comes back. He will be unrestricted next offseason, but for this coming season, I like it. James Johnson can help a little bit on the wings if he's healthy. Blake on a 1 year minimum, absolutely nobody is talking about, but Blake had really good moments in the postseason, and with a full year with Brooklyn, if he stays healthy, is certainly going to be a contributor, and I low-key, kind of sneaky like the DeAndre Bembry signing as well. The only reason it would have been an A+ for me is if they would have been able to keep Jeff Green, but apart from that, I think it's been a really, really good free agency period for Brooklyn. Next up, the Denver Nuggets. They bring back Will Barton, JaMychal Green, and they bring in Jeff Green, and I give them a B+ for it. Will Barton, JaMychal Green, those guys are both fine players. Barton just needs to stay healthy and be a contributor, but they're going to need his offensive creation in the backcourt as they await Jamal Murray's return from injury. But as I just talked about with Brooklyn, I love the Jeff Green signing for them. He was a hugely impactful player for them, can play multiple different front court positions, really shot the ball well this most recent year, and is just a plug-and-play guy that every playoff team would love to have. The fact that Denver ended up with him helps them a ton, and he's a really good fit alongside Jokic in contrast to someone like Paul Millsap, who's probably going to be looking for a different team. The Milwaukee Bucks, they get back Bobby Portis, they bring in George Hill, Rodney Hood, and Semi Ojeleye. I gave them an A+. The ability to bring back Bobby Portis on that cheap of a deal, I know he's going to go into next offseason looking to really get his money, but Bobby Portis was a huge part of their team this year, one of the only guys out of their entire roster that actually played consistent minutes in the finals. Huge for them to bring him back on a deal that was not expensive. I like bringing in George Hill, someone that's accustomed to the system, someone that played really well for them while he was there and still can shoot the basketball. I like the flyer on Rodney Hood as well as someone that could maybe provide them a little bit of a scoring punch if he can get healthy. Semi Ojeleye, I don't really care about, but I absolutely think this is an A+, given the situation Milwaukee was in from a salary perspective coming into this offseason. Love the free agency period for Milwaukee. Next up, the Clippers. They also get an A+. Reggie Jackson, Nicholas Batum, both returning, bringing in Justice Winslow on a 2-year deal, and of course, Kawhi Leonard comes back. You can't have anything other than A+ when you're re-signing Kawhi Leonard. The fact that they were able to afford Reggie Jackson and retain him is huge. He was fantastic for them in the postseason. Again, they'll need his perimeter creation with Kawhi out for a good amount of the year due to injury. Bringing back Batum was significant as well. And I like I like Justice Winslow as a little bit of a flyer here as well. He'll go to the Nick Batum school of versatile wings and hopefully learn some things. And I still think there's some hope for Justice Winslow out there. And just another kind of interesting guy to add to the roster that can kind of grow and develop behind the scenes and potentially be a solid contributor for them. The New York Knicks, Evan Fournier, 4 years, 78, Derrick Rose, 3 years, 43, Nerlens Noel, Alec Burks, and Taj Gibson on smaller deals. I gave them a C-. I mentioned 2 of these players in the biggest overpay video yesterday, that being Evan Fournier, Nerlens Noel. I get why they want the contracts, because they want contracts that they can move, they can trade. They're obviously looking to pair a big-time player with potentially Julius Randle, with potentially RJ Barrett, whoever it is, and they need mid-level contracts to be able to do that. Now with signing Randle to the extension, it's not going to be him. So having Fournier, Rose, Noel, Burks, all these guys on between $10 to $18 million a year deals, I understand that, but from an individual standpoint with most of these contracts, I do think they're a bit of an overpay for a team that's going to be good but not great next year. So not the best free agency period for them, but still pretty solid. The Mavs, they bring back Tim Hardaway, they bring in Reggie Bullock and Sterling Brown. I gave them a B-. I'm glad they didn't lose Tim Hardaway. I think he's a better player than most people give him credit for. The contract is relatively fair. Reggie Bullock gives them a wing that can guard and can shoot, something they've desperately needed over the last couple of seasons. And Sterling Brown is a nice flyer. I just felt like they had a chance to do more. This was an offseason and a free agency period that we had been anticipating for Dallas for years, because they had the opportunity to bring in another big-time guy alongside Luka and, at the time, Kristaps Porzingis. Now they're looking to move Porzingis. But this is kind of their team now. This is their cap space for the next couple of seasons. Outside of any kind of trades, this is the roster that they have. I felt like they could have done more. They potentially were in on the Kyle Lowry stuff, but ultimately not a bad free agency period for Dallas, just maybe a bit disappointing. The Atlanta Hawks, John Collins on a big extension, 5 years, 125. Then they bring back Lou Williams, bring in Gorgie Jang, and bring back Solomon Hill, all on 1-year deals. I gave them a B. They had to re-sign John Collins. 5 years, 125 is a little bit more than I would like to pay, but when you're dealing with restricted free agents, you can't really split hairs too much. You need to be able to retain him, and they did. The other guys are fine. Nothing too crazy or exciting or flashy here in Atlanta, as they did most of their work when it comes to free agency last offseason. Next up, the Houston Rockets, Daniel Tice, 4 years, 36, David Nwaba, 3 years, 15. I gave them a C-. I wasn't expecting much from them in their free agency period. Everything for them was going to be about potential trades as well as the draft. I think these are 2 pretty significant overpays. I don't really care about having Daniel Tice on a $9 million a year deal for 4 years. That doesn't really provide me much flexibility. I think he's a fine player, but we've already discussed my feelings on paying bigs a significant amount of money for agency. And then David Nwaba, he's fine, be able to guard a little bit, maybe a nice little flyer, but nothing too crazy there for Houston. I gave them a C-. The Miami Heat, Duncan Robinson, 5 years, 90. Kyle Lowry, 3 years, 85. PJ Tucker, 2 years, 15. Markieff Morris, 1 year minimum. Dwayne Dedmon, 1 year minimum. A couple of other young guys, including Omer Yurtseven, former NC State Wolfpack guy who actually transferred out of there, but he's been playing well in Summer League. They bring him in on a 2-year deal. I gave them an A. The only reason it's not an A+ is some of these numbers, Robinson, Lowry, even PJ Tucker, are probably overpays in the long run. I don't really mind the Duncan Robinson number. That's just kind of what shooters get paid. In the long run, though, Lowry and then maybe PJ Tucker, depending on if he picks up his option or not, those maybe could be overpays in the future, so I gave them an A rather than an A+, but they got significantly better. They retained key players, and they're going to have an opportunity to do some things with this roster moving forward with a potential Tyler Hero trade, with a little bit of the flexibility that these contracts afford them to be able to maybe become a contender towards the top of the Eastern Conference. But regardless, they got much, much better. They got the one guy that half the league wanted in Kyle Lowry, so I'm going to give Miami an A for their free agency period. Next up now, the LA Lakers. Talen Horton-Tucker, 2 years, 32. Kendrick Nunn, 2 years, 10. And then Ariza, Howard, Ellington, Carmelo Anthony, Kent Bazemore, Malik Monk, all of them on 1-year deals. I give them an A+. I know people are memeing the Lakers for signing all these old guys and things like that, but given their salary limitations, filling out the roster like this is honestly amazing. There's not a ton of defense amongst these guys, but when it comes to shooting and scoring, which this roster desperately needed an infusion of shooting, I think a lot of these guys are going to help. And then when it comes to the postseason, they're going to be relying a lot on LeBron and Anthony Davis to be really good defensively, but at least they're going to have the shooting that historically you've always needed around LeBron to maximize his talents. Talen Horton-Tucker has an opportunity to improve over the next couple of seasons on this contract and be a relatively significant part of the rotation. I think Kendrick Nunn is a talented player. 2 years, 10 for him is a big get. Then some veterans, of course. Ariza can shoot, maybe defend a little bit. Dwight, we know what he does. Wayne Ellington, good shooter. Carmelo Anthony, actually been a pretty important bench player for Portland over the last couple of seasons. Kent Bazemore, not going to do a ton. Malik Monk could do some things for this group as well as a shooter. Again, relative to the expectations, given their salary limitations post Russell Westbrook trade, I think this is a slam dunk offseason for them, and they have really done a fantastic job of filling out the roster. Granted, they have the advantage of being the Lakers, but still. Next up, the Washington Wizards. Spencer Dinwiddie, 3 years, 62 is the only deal they've signed. I gave them a B. Maybe it's a bit of an overpay for Spencer Dinwiddie at a little bit over $20 million a year, but I think he fits something that they need both of. They need a guy that fits well alongside Bradley Beal in the short term, and a guy that would be easy to move should Beal request out. Certainly, Spencer Dinwiddie's contract is much easier to move than the Russell Westbrook one was should Beal want out of Washington. I think he's a good player. I think as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be a good addition to this Washington roster, and if Beal does ask out, I don't think that contract is going to be too difficult for them to move for some value. I like that for Washington. Next up, the Pacers. Nothing truly exciting here. TJ McConnell, 4 years, 35. Torrey Craig, 2 years, 10. I gave them a C+. Again, nothing special. I think the McConnell thing is a bit of an overpay. I know their fans love TJ McConnell. If there was an award for Defensive Sixth Man of the Year, he probably would have won it last year. He's fine. I'm going to give them a C+. The Warriors, they signed Andre Iguodala, Otto Porter, and Nemanja Bjelica to 1-year minimum deals. I gave them a B+. I love the Bjelica and Otto Porter signings. Those are guys that are going to be able to shoot. Otto Porter's a good player, can guard a little bit, and a better shooter than I think people give them credit for. And then Iggy's fine. I would have preferred to see them address some of the other needs on the roster, but I understand why they brought him in. I would prefer to see a little bit more front court depth out of this team, but that's not too difficult to find. I get why they bring in Iggy. I give them a B+. The Charlotte Hornets. Kelly Oubre, 2 years, 26. Ish Smith, 1 year, 4.5. And some rumors about them trying to bring in Lauri Markkanen as well. They waived Caleb Martin today, which maybe could show that they are chasing after another player in free agency. Could be Lauri Markkanen. I gave them a B+. I think the Oubre signing is perfect for them. I think he fits this roster. Still relatively young. An athletic guy that can shoot is going to fit really, really well with the guys they already have on this team. And if it doesn't work out, it's not a prohibitive contract. I think that's good value. And I think this grade of a B+ could bump up into the A category if they're able to bring in Lauri Markkanen as well, depending on what the contract is. It's a good offseason for the Hornets so far. The San Antonio Spurs, I talked about them. They already got an entire video to themselves the other day. Doug McDermott, Zach Collins, Jacques Landale, Bryn Forbes. I gave them a B+. I think it shows a commitment to a youth movement. I think McDermott is good value as a shooter. And overall, they just took some interesting chances on some guys that could develop into nice players, and if they don't, it's not prohibitive to their long-term salary situation. I think for what their roster is, the moves they made were really, really good fits. I like what San Antonio did. Chicago, who also got their own video. DeMar DeRozan, 3 years, 85. Lonzo Ball, 4 years, 85. Alex Caruso, 4 years, 37. And Tony Bradley on a 2-year minimum. I gave them an A. I don't love how everything fits together. You could make the argument certainly that DeMar DeRozan was an overpay. You could make an argument that Lonzo Ball and the Caruso signings were an overpay. But when you consider they came in the offseason with just $20 million in salary cap space, and they were able to sign all of these guys and become a much, much better team for next season, I think you have to give them at least an A. The only reason it's not an A+ is I don't think that everybody is a perfect fit, and I do think the DeRozan signing is an overpay. But outside of that, I think this was a very, very good free agency period for Chicago, considering the amount of cap space they brought to the table when it began. Next up, the New Orleans Pelicans. I give them an F. Devontae Graham, 4 years, 47, is really the only significant part of this. They come into free agency with $30+ million. They created cap space in a trade. They moved down to the draft to be able to create that cap space, and then they ended up having to trade away a future first-round pick just to overpay Devontae Graham. It's absolutely an F for me. They could have done so much more. It seemed like they were confident they would have done a lot more as it relates to Kyle Lowry and things like that. And they were not able to improve this team in a significant way at all next year. They're probably getting their own video at some point. Next up, the Toronto Raptors. Gary Trent, 3 years, 54. Kem Birch, 3 years, 20. Sam Decker, 1 year minimum. When you include the Lowry sign-in trade, I'm going to give them a B+. I like getting back Precious Achiuwa in that trade. I think he's a perfect guy for what they need and someone that's really going to develop well there in Toronto. They can get value out of Goran Dragic down the road. The Trent signing, it's probably a bit much. 18 a year for Gary Trent's probably a bit much, but he's still young. It's not a super long contract. I don't mind that one. Kem Birch, again, you guys know how I feel about big guys, probably a little bit of an overpay, but at the end of the day, when you combine the Lowry sign and trade and then retaining Gary Trent, I like both those moves. I give Toronto a B+. Next up now, the Sacramento Kings. Rashawn Holmes, 4 years, 55. Mo Harkless, Terrence Davis, and Alex Len, all on 2-year deals. I gave them a C+. You guys know my feelings about the Rashawn Holmes deal, again, in the overpay video yesterday. But Flyers on Mo Harkless and, more importantly, Terrence Davis are very interesting to me. I know they're retaining Davis and then they're bringing in Harkless, but guys that could potentially grow and develop in, within this group as versatile wings that they desperately need, I'll give them a C+. The Cleveland Cavaliers, Jared Allen, 5 years, $100 million. They retained him. That's their only signing the offseason. I'm going to give them a B. I'm higher on Jared Allen than other people. I talked about, some of the big guy stuff in this most recent video about overpays, and a lot of people brought up, well, how do you not ding the Cavs for this Jared Allen signing then? Because I think Jared Allen has the opportunity to become a pretty good outside shooter. He's a very good rim protector. He just provides you more offensively than just a stiff roll to the rim and protect the rim guy. I think there's more there. And when you combine him with Evan Mobley, that's a really, really cool and a really interesting front court combination. 20 a year for Jared Allen. Yeah, it's probably a bit much. You prefer to be paying him more like 15 like Clint Capella. But ultimately, I don't mind it too much. I will give them a B. The Orlando Magic. Robin Lopez on a 1-year deal. Mo Wagner on a 2-year minimum deal. I give them a C-. I don't really get the Robin Lopez signing. They already have plenty of young bigs, Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Bamba among them. I would prefer to just play those guys, and if it doesn't work out, then I can always go out and get another veteran big to kind of fill out the roster. Don't really understand the Lopez signing there. And then a flyer on Wagner's fine, but doesn't really move the needle for me. C- for Orlando. Next up, the Thunder. Mike Muscala, 2 years, $7 million. This is basically an incomplete. I guess I'll give them a C, whatever. They really didn't do anything this offseason. Again, just 2 years, $7 million for Mike Muscala. And then the Detroit Pistons. Kelly Olynyk, 3 years, 37. Corey Joseph, 2 years, 10. Trey Lyles, 2 years, 5. I gave them a B. Kelly Olynyk is a very interesting signing. I think him along with Corey Joseph, those are two veterans that are going to be able to help along the young guys, help them understand what it means to be an NBA player. And both of those guys can certainly contribute. Olynyk more so than Joseph, had a really good end of the year in Houston last year. And I think 3 years, 37 is pretty good value, and a guy that could be a possible trade chip as well down the road. And then Trey Lyles, an interesting flyer as well. I still think he's like just 25 years old or something like that. A guy that can certainly still grow and develop there in Detroit. But by my count, that is the entirety of NBA free agency and grades for every single team. Just my opinion. If you don't agree with it, that's totally fine. I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say down in the comment section below about your own opinions on each of these free agents. But with all those things said, that is going to be the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials as well. Once again, my name is Tucker. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Saturday and your weekend, and I will see y'all next time.